You can never revitalize a neighborhood from the outside. It never works. You have to revitalize it from the inside.
People who live in Fitchburg have to take responsibility. It isn't just the councilors, it isn't just the mayor, it isn't the city planners. You know, you can't complain if you don't get involved.
I think an argument could be made that there's been an excess of process just because it's taken so darn long.
I could say in my heart that I really do believe that we'll make it. I really do believe that.
This is Cleghorn Street. This is the famous Cleghorn Street that the neighborhood takes the name after.
It's an old French neighborhood for the most part. So you got elderly French-speaking people living next door to Laotian people that are new to the neighborhood, living next door to Spanish-speaking people, living next door to me. It's probably, in my opinion, the most diverse neighborhood in the city.
Cleghorn has seen times where it was really the quintessential American community. And little by little, the engine or the reason for being left. And that trickled down throughout the neighborhood.
Right now, if you drive up Plymouth Street from Daniel Street, you're driving into an empty wasteland of vacant lots and rundown buildings. It's a pretty bleak place to go.
We have a lot of people that have nothing to do, nowhere to go. You know, I guess no hope.
I think a lot of people sort of internalize that and they want out. They don't want to be part of improving it. They want to get on the first train out of town.
Being a neighbor means being involved. Ser un vecino significa estar envuelto.
This is a story about the power of community organizing and how one neighborhood came together around the issue of affordable housing.
Somebody has to stand back and say, what are we doing?
Would the housing be all single families as originally planned by the city? Or would the community find its place at the table and change the outcome? The project was called the Plymouth Street Initiative, and it became the focal point of a process that would significantly alter the balance of power between the city of Fitchburg and one of its poorest neighborhoods. When city planners considered how to revitalize Cleghorn, their main concern was to diversify the neighborhood by reducing housing density and encouraging home ownership.
We were still essentially dealing with a neighborhood in the mid-1980s, late 1980s that was built to fit a lifestyle and a culture of the turn of the century.
There were a number of multifamily properties in that area that had just gotten dilapidated over the years. They had just gone to hell in a handbasket and had to be torn down.
We did, as planners, certainly recognize that a long-term planning solution did not involve solely the demolition of an abandoned property, but also begged the question, what are you going to do after the properties are torn down? We realized that with the value of the remaining land after a demolition, the owners of those buildings would never redeem those properties, and that eventually they would become City of Fitchburg property. We now had a large enough area to be able to do some serious planning around the recovery of this neighborhood.
When we first envisioned the project, it was going to be all single-family homes because we felt that there were enough multifamily or rental properties in this immediate area.
The city needed a development partner to invest federal money, and it turned, as it had in the past, to the Twin Cities Community Development Corporation, or CDC.
Good afternoon, this is Twin Cities CDC.
This relationship is critical for both parties. The CDC provides logistical support for development, as well as a kind of community stamp of approval for the project. And the city supports the CDC through grants and developer fees that literally enable the organization to exist.
we're very dependent on the city government for outside funding, so we need to be working in partnership. We want to work in partnership, but our agendas are sometimes slightly different. We have a different perspective.
Keeping funders happy is quite a balancing act. You want to make sure that it's within budget and they're getting, the best bang for the buck.
It was clear.
Business as usual had been that the city administrators would handpick the CDC director and perhaps a neighborhood center director, one or two leaders that they knew of in the community to work and maybe meet on a regular basis as a committee and come up with a plan.
And for phase 1 of the plan, the city did not actively solicit community input.
The first phase of the work we're doing in Cleghorn involved the construction of 3 single-family homes and their sale to income-eligible homeowners.
They said that they were building these 3 houses together with CDC. When they came in to show a plan that they had already designed, they had already developed 10 years ago.
Initially, it was a little dicey. In fact, the very first day that we dug the foundations, the contractor showed up at the job site and there was an abandoned vehicle stuck right in the middle of the cellar hole. We took it as a statement that this isn't going to be easy.
Look, you got a neighborhood where, while we were building the 3 single-family homes, there was a shooting where somebody was wounded. Just after the 3 single-family homes were completed, there was an arson. Guy was shot and paralyzed. That all took place on Plymouth Street. Just a few blocks up, there were 2 murders over Christmas. Just the other week, there was a shooting on Daniel Street 3 blocks away. This is a tough neighborhood. We need to have residents in the neighborhood who are committed to this neighborhood, who are not going to walk away from things.
We want to make sure the community is deeply involved and that what we're doing really reflects the interests of low and moderate income people, really, not just in theory.
All the time the city doesn't have the answer. They think they do, but they don't know what the residents need. The residents know better what they need.
Because the CDC is dependent on the city, any strong community organizing effort represented a risky path.
My worst fear really about this whole thing was that if it broke down, this would affect every development project that the CDC would ever want to do.
For the CDC to really give over power and decision-making opportunities to residents is not an easy thing to do, and it's so essential.
There were great risks with taking on a new model that was challenging and that was sort of seen as antagonistic toward the city's goals.
But a more basic obstacle was the lack of involvement of Cleghorn residents themselves.
We were struggling to find people who are motivated enough to come to a meeting. You hear over and over again that people feel they don't have a voice, so what's the point? For people who do have low incomes, often they have to work 2 jobs, 3 jobs, odd shifts. So try to pull together a meeting where you can meet everyone's schedule. It's very difficult to do. The first 9 months, I'd say we'd have meetings with 2 people.
Developing awareness in the neighborhood was the first step in the organizing campaign around Phase 2 of the Plymouth Street project. To help focus community dialogue on the development, the CDC generated a set of housing principles.
We started by doing home visits, literally getting out, talking to people.
So it was almost in sort of a democratic voting mechanism of saying, look at these. Do you believe in these? Come and cast your vote. Tell us what you think.
I just would like to sit down one day and talk to you.
We asked them if they thought these made sense for this neighborhood, and we asked them to sign. We actually got their endorsement of the principles. We then decided to have an intro large planning meeting in May of 2001, where we invited people from the neighborhood to attend and to help think about what kinds of changes they wanted to see in the neighborhood.
The city and CDC were going to build several more houses in the neighborhood as part of Phase 2 of the Plymouth Street Initiative.
And where we're talking about building are 8 lots that are located just south of Plymouth Street in the area in red here.
But now, the CDC was committed to including the community in key decisions.
There was a kind of a change within the CDC away from strictly being a development entity or an agency that did things to this need to organize the community and to work with the community and to take input from the community.
We're sharing a vision today that we want to give a better life. We're not going to revolutionize all of Clegon.
This was a wonderful experience that we got at the time. I think we have 100-something people together from the neighborhood, but also from the different agencies that in Fitchburg that they were invited.
We have today the voices of our community.
Being responsible is being a neighbor. Ser responsable es ser vecino. But that is a commitment. Pero usted tiene que comprometerse a ser un vecino. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I think it's really important to record those ideas. So we heard some people saying they'd really like to see single families. We heard people saying we really need a lot of units, rental units, and we heard people saying let's do a mix, which is what we had anticipated, but it was nice to have people talking to each other about that.
They were really seemed to be asking us our opinion, and I saw that as an opportunity, to get involved.
It's always wonderful to see people that have a stake in the neighborhood come out and say what's on their mind.
I was really impressed by the turnout, and I think it really showed how there's a really strong need for affordable housing and a lot of people who are being, working hard but being priced out of, a home.
We had a couple people run out screaming. That's the sign of a good meeting, a healthy meeting, a charged meeting. And I don't think we're going to lose people from that. I think people are just heated up. It just shows that there's something going on. People are passionate about the neighborhood.
There was something that drew me there and allowed me to stay there. Something pouring into the air that said to me, Yvette, you have an opportunity to learn and to become a leader. And somehow it's right here in this room.
I was so caught up in it that when they said that the next meeting of PSI, Plymouth Street Initiative, was the following Wednesday, I had to be there. Because then I had to see what was going to happen and had to put in my 2 cents worth, I guess.
As a result of the May 19th planning meeting, we decided to create a site plan design team that had the responsibility of taking the vision, the general vision we heard at that broad public meeting in May, and turning it into a concrete plan.
We're going to have a group of people who really sit down and really negotiate and really do the hard pencil sharpening work. We're not just going to argue in theory, because that could have gone on forever.
We said, okay, we understand your concerns about involving the neighborhood, and we'll go along with that. We'll participate with you. We'll come to the meetings, and generally it's a good idea. You don't want to shove anything down anybody's throat. We want everybody to be in agreement with what it is we're doing in the neighborhood.
The CDC recruited neighborhood residents, business leaders, and city officials to the site plan design team.
There were 9 of us on the Phase 2 committee.
We have people from the business, we have people from the community, we have people from the church, simple people from the neighborhood.
Site plan design team members came to their meetings with the city determined to represent what they saw as the views of the community.
Every meeting, we pulled up the vote from the big general meeting to begin with and said, this is what they want.
We were representing the neighborhood, and the neighborhood wanted multis. And it was important for us to get that across, no matter what.
We felt it important to have single-family homes, owner-occupied homes, that people could take care of, and we were very leery about the things we were hearing about building 3 families and 4 families that would be owner-occupied.
At its heart, this was a conflict over what type of housing the neighborhood needed.
When you go to the neighborhood, they're like, well, listen, I have a big family. My mother lives with me, my kids live with me, and my grandkids would live with me. We need big units. We need big houses. I've lived here for 15 years. What do you mean I can't live here anymore?
The city needed to hear that because they want, and I understand that the setback and the yard and the driveway by your side, it looks very, very nice. You know, who would deny that? But the houses still have to be large enough to hold the families that are in these neighborhoods.
Fitchburg's not against affordable housing. What we're for is a balanced community. What we're against is segregating affordable housing in such a concentrated way that the neighborhood itself doesn't have enough diversity to be able to offer a good environment for the people who live in it.
In the first place, I think Larry and Dave probably buy into the issue of recreating this neighborhood in their image and likeness and inviting all kinds of yuppies from Boston to come and live here.
That's not what the neighborhood is. I mean, certainly we're revitalizing and changing the neighborhood in some respects, but we didn't want to do that at the expense of the people that live there.
We are living in the neighborhood and they have to be listening. It's not your decision, it's our decision.
Adding to the conflict over what would be built was the tension over who should be negotiating.
The city viewed it as the city against CDC. The city did not want the people there at all. It was like, tell these guys to go away. I'm dealing with the CDC.
They would only talk with the executive director and maybe the housing development director. They didn't want to have anything to do with the community.
And Meredith and Emily kept saying, no, you're going to deal with the people.
I mean, there was always that period where we were wondering whether we had gone beyond the point of no return. There were many times where we heard, you know, we're going to get another developer. It's okay. We don't need you. You're obsolete.
I've always felt it was very important for government to be efficient and that we spend our money wisely and effectively. And the extent to which process becomes unnecessary and gets in the way of efficient projects, then I chafe a little bit.
I think the city was hoping that we would provide that sort of greasing the skids, so to speak, to make things go a little bit easier. By making the community talk directly to the city planners, we were providing them with sort of their worst nightmare, regardless of what it was that the neighborhood residents wanted.
It was a little awkward at first, and there were some bruised feelings, I think, at first, because here we were, we thought we were doing stuff for them, and they thought we were doing stuff to them.
It certainly is never a good feeling if you're seen as the enemy, and yet you think you're there to be part of the solution. We were being painted, if you will, as the bad guys. And so when you're the enemy, you feel a little bit like you're on the defensive.
It can be confrontational for those guys, but also, you know what, that's part of their jobs. You know, I take them across the chin in my job, so they can take a few lumps and bumps and still not be affected by it. At least they shouldn't be, you know.
The site plan design team met every couple of weeks throughout the summer and into the fall. These guys were working around the clock, and they were really building relationships with each other and getting stronger and stronger and stronger.
It took a lot of weeks, a lot of meetings, pre-meetings, post-meetings. I mean, we'd go in a half hour before the scheduled meeting, have a meeting, and then we'd have our meeting that was supposed to last 1 or 2 hours. They'd end up lasting 3, and then we'd have to have a post-meeting to discuss when the next meeting was.
She called me up, Yvette, are you ready at 4:30? Well, the meeting's not till 5:30. Well, yeah, we got to meet before the meeting. After the meeting, we try to get out of there to go home. Yvette, stay for the post-meeting. I was dreaming meetings.
Driving in, I'd say, I don't even want to see these people. I don't want to do this anymore. I'm tired. But once you would get in there, the group would just kind of get you going, and you'd be psyched, and you'd be able to do it.
This committee, everybody participated. It wasn't just 1 or 2 people. Everybody had something to say, and everybody was heard, and everybody listened. And that doesn't happen at most committee meetings.
You had proposed the issue of lighting and all that business, and we wanted that included in the plan.
We don't all agree on the committee about everything. We never did, we never will. But that didn't stop us from working together.
We both parties learned a lot as we discussed the matter. I think they learned a lot more about where we were coming from, well, we heard where they were coming from.
We asked for a bigger rental unit. Not only does it add towards financial viability from a rent standpoint, it also represents...
You really saw this blossoming of others who had never done anything like this, never expected to speak in public, never expected to contradict a person in a position of authority.
It doesn't work.
Yeah, because it just seems to me that if I want to buy a house, I want to walk in and I want to see, even if it's not finished, I want to know...
I became a lot more comfortable with the process because I could see that the community residents really did get it. Whereas before that, I kept saying, you know, if you push the city too hard, they're going to walk away and we won't have anything.
I really didn't need to be there anymore. There was no need for a gatekeeper because the process had already happened, and we had gotten to the point where there was a group of leaders.
In any kind of negotiations, everybody has to give up something, and so everybody wins something also.
I really have to commend the group of people who went through that process because they really were committed.
Every single time we went into that negotiating room, we all knew what one another thought, and we all stood together, and we did not waver.
By the fall, the site plan design team and the city had developed a detailed plan for Phase 2, finally reaching agreement to build family-sized units and to target low-income buyers. But on two critical points, building two-family homes and CDC developer fees, they could not agree. Now, the new community leaders of Cleghorn and the CDC faced a decision. Would they risk the entire agreement by choosing to confront the city publicly?
We went back to give the plan to the people, and my Lord, you know, all these people show up.
All of those challenging questions, how many people, can you really do this, what if we don't win, all of the seeds of doubt that had been circulating, this is where we had to prove our stuff. This is the moment of truth.
Hi, my name is Betty Brunel. This is my church. This is my neighborhood.
When it got going, all of a sudden, all of our passion from all of the weeks came out at that meeting, and I don't think there was any stopping us that night.
We have heard from you as a community how important family-sized rental and owner-occupied units are.
This is our decision for the neighborhood. This is what we'd like to have at the time that the houses is going to be built.
We get up on stage, we said to the people that the city's not moving on these 2 points.
No matter how hard we tried, they would not budge. That money does not belong to them. It's not coming out of their personal pocket. It belongs to the community. The city just can't do what they feel like doing and not be accountable to the community. The community has rights.
This is where it all starts, and this is where we as a community tell the city that this is what we want.
I'm going to ask you, community, to stand up and be counted. Here are some cards.
This is like stand up and be counted or forget it. And these people just did it. You know, it was really wonderful. Extremely powerful moment.
And I got up and I said, I'm not one to advocate violence.
Please, I don't advocate violence or anything like that. But I leave you with these words. Do what you have to do by any means necessary.
Now, I had no idea that would follow me. That's going to follow me to my grave.
This is the time that the city has to do the change, and then we need now.
And then at the end, I asked people to stand up if they believed in what we were doing.
For those of you that support the plan, could you do me a favor and stand up?
And everybody stood up, including the city. And when it was all over, I mean, I just had this overwhelming euphoric feeling like we had won something.
And that's such a wonderful feeling, to be able to stand up and say, we did this. We did this.
They were so strong, so precise, so articulate, so unified. Everything that we had worked on for months, it came to its full fruition that night, and there you have it.
In the days that followed, community residents and stakeholders sent their feedback to City Hall. And finally, after months of tension and effort, the city, the CDC, and the neighborhood agreed on all 12 points.
We ended up more or less compromising. We're building a couple of two-family homes as part of the project, which, you know, maybe that didn't make everybody happy, but at least it's something that everybody can live with. Upon reflection, it was an okay compromise to make.
Community representatives had now won a real role in key decisions and assured a better project for all involved.
And I can remember when we signed, you know, we all stood and signed the plan on the wall in the same room where we had negotiated it.
When it all was said and done, and we signed off on it, I think everyone felt a sense of relief on both sides of the issue. That, okay, we didn't get everything we wanted, but what we got was something that we all feel comfortable is going to be good for the neighborhood and that we're not going to regret being involved in. I think that was the point at which, if you'd want to say that we all declared victory, then that probably was the point.
The city of Fitchburg has adopted the Plymouth Street Initiative as a model for revitalizing its many inner-city neighborhoods.
I see people now that live in this neighborhood who have become activists, have learned that they like to be active in their communities and not just in this given process.
Many have said that we would never reach this point, that it was impossible for a community-based group to partner with the city and rebuild the neighborhood.
The Twin Cities CDC has created a national model for how community organizing and housing development can work together.
And we all realize that this neighborhood is not lost, but embarking on a new beginning.
I think the CDC has been invaluable because they have provided the contact with the community, and I think they've done a great job in bringing people together to discuss what they want and what they need and how they want their neighborhood to look.
I used to think it was such a far step away to know politicians or people in power. And it really isn't. You know, once you start and you talk to them, they talk back. You know, it's not that hard.
And the Cleghorn neighborhood continues to grow stronger as the actual construction draws near.
It is amazing how people, masses of people, can move mountains.
If there is enough passion and enough people backing you up, anything is possible.
It's not only a saying per se, there is power in numbers. It's a reality. There is power in numbers.
Thanks to the leap of faith taken by the CDC, city planners, and community leaders, the physical landscape here in Cleghorn will soon change forever. And the environment for grassroots community activism already has.
Never give up hope. Never, never give up hope. It can work, and it does, because we proved it.